Welcome to The Cynical Developer, the podcast that helps you to improve your development knowledge and career through explaining the latest and greatest in development technology and providing you with what you need to succeed as a developer. We've recently launched our Patreon page, which can be found at cynicaldeveloper.com/Patreon. If you aren't familiar with Patreon, it's an easy way for those who are interested in this show to help out by simply pledging a small amount each month in sponsorship. Now that could be as little as $5 a month, which is about £3.80, or as much as you like. You will enable us to dedicate more time creating more content to help you, including videos, more blog posts, and even more shows. So if you can, head over to cynicaldeveloper.com/Patreon and get involved. In this episode, we're joined by Jamie Taylor of the .NET Core Podcast and Paul Seal from cochair.co.uk. We're here today to discuss being a better and more effective developer and what could potentially make you a bad developer. Paul's been on the show before, but for those of you who don't know him, Paul is an Umbraco MVP working for the Umbraco Gold partner, Moriyama. He is passionate about Umbraco and web development in general. He loves to create open source packages and likes to share all his experiences and knowledge through his website, cochair.co.uk, and on his YouTube channel as well. We're also joined by Jamie Taylor. Jamie is a .NET contractor, podcast host, gamer, bass player, and productivity novice. He loves to talk .NET Core, as evidenced by his past appearances on the show, where he told us all about .NET Core. And he's still on a quest to take all 10 top spots in Apple Podcasts, even if it means creating 10,000 podcasts in the process. Yeah, he wrote this, not me. Anyway, welcome to The Cynical Developer, both.
Hello. Hi, James.
Right.
Hi,
Yes,
Jamie.
good to have you both back on.
It's been a while for
it
me.
has been a little while. We've not been in the same room for a long time as well, so it's nice to catch up. I will caveat this episode that we've already been sat here for an hour before recording, messing about, talking. So if we do go off on a tangent, I do apologise. I will try and edit it down for everybody as much as I possibly can. But as I said, we're here to discuss being a better, more effective developer. And I get asked this quite a lot by people that I meet and people that I work with, what I sort of see as being a good developer and what I see as being a bad developer. And it's very subjective. It really is. And then what sort of spurred this on is that I don't know, you saw the tweet, but you probably did. It's got a lot of following and a lot of notoriety about 10x developers. It's been mocked to high heaven, and I wanted to cover the 11 points that come up in that and how poor they are. But I also wanted to sort of tackle that a little bit to say, how do real developers try to be the best that they can be? How do other people become good developers in my eyes or in Paul or Jamie's eyes? So that's what we're going to try and discuss today. So what we'll do a bit of a round robin maybe to start off, and we'll go with the flow that way. But before we get into that, should we just discuss what that tweet said? I think. Are you both okay with that?
Yeah,
sure.
Good. Yeah, let's go through it.
That tweet started with, "What makes a good developer? How do you get stuff done outside your day job? What do you do to improve your craft? 10x engineers. Founders, if you ever come across this rare breed of engineer, grab them. If you have a 10x engineer as part of your first few engineers, you increase the odds of your startup success significantly. Okay, here is a tough question. How do you spot a 10x engineer?" And it gets a little bit worse once we drop into the points.
Can I just ask, why has he got 11 points? It's really annoying. It's 10x, and
because he's switching up to 11 because everybody knows that there's always that one bit further you can go.
Yeah.
So he starts with 10x engineers hate meetings. They think it is a waste of time, and obviously things are being discussed. They attend meetings because the manager has called for a staff meeting to discuss the features and status. Well, what? Um, I don't know. Maybe, yeah, maybe we discuss these as we go. So, I think most developers hate meetings, but they're a necessary evil.
It depends. Like if you've got a regular meeting in, if you're going to demo your progress or something like that, that's good. But if you've just got a meeting for the sake of a meeting and nothing productive comes out of that meeting, and you're just itching to get back to working on something so you can actually show, then I agree with them that I hate meetings. And if it's about that, or meetings about meetings are the worst. When you've got a pre-meeting meeting.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. I'm a big proponent of this meeting should have been an email because,
Yeah.
and sometimes this email should have been a meeting, because sometimes they get out of control. But I also really like, I've seen it a lot where you can get a device that as you walk into the meeting, you can scan it somehow and it will keep a log of everyone's, like the total salary of everyone in the room. And for every minute that goes by, it shows you how much money is being wasted with you all sort of sitting there arguing over the most inane things. Because let's be honest, most of the time, the big meetings end up just arguments over what font to use or where the button should be. And it's like, you don't need the full, you maybe don't need the entire engineering staff to be able to do this. This is, yeah,
I'll be adding up. I'll be adding up how much it went up when someone walked in, or if there was just one other person in there with you. What's the difference in that
yeah,
salary now?
exactly,
That's what I'll be doing.
exactly.
Yeah. To put it out there that 10x engineers hate meetings, I think is just odd because everybody pretty much hates a meeting, and I know developers that just hate meetings outright, don't want to do them. And if anything, if you hate a meeting, you're not a 10x engineer, you're not a team player. You're not bringing anything else to the team. You're not helping anybody. You're just hindering them, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
So, point 2. Timings in the office for 10x engineers is highly irregular. They tend to work when very few folks are around. If there is a crowd or all hands meetings, they're not visible. Most of them are working late nights and come home late from the office. Well, now that is nothing to do, in my opinion, with being a 10x engineer. If you're having to work long hours, you're coming home late from work, then that to me that's a problem in the team. You're not managing your projects properly, surely.
Yeah, that's someone who can't switch off, or someone who can't be honest that they've taken on more than they can chew.
Definitely. It does stink a little bit of work smarter, not harder. You know what I mean? If you're, like you say, James and Paul,
Yeah.
obviously, if you're working into the wee hours of the morning just to get something out, then yeah, you've overpromised is what you've done. You've said, yeah, I can get this done and this done and this done. Whereas, or maybe it's been pressure from above, maybe the project managers or whoever sets the workload has gone, yeah, you can do this in these 3 days. I don't mind. I don't care that you're the expert and you're supposed to be telling me. I'll tell you when you need to get it done.
Yeah, it's that one's a really odd one. I know I've worked places in the past where they made sure that we were in half an hour before we were supposed to be in, and if we left on the dot when we were supposed to leave, we got disciplinaries for it, and we were told that we had to work at least half an hour most days past the end of our allotted shift time. But that is, I think it's a false economy, really, and by prescribing to the fact that you're going to work weekends, you're going to work late nights, you're making a rod for your own back, really, because you're going to end up with the business expecting that of you all of the time, and it does you no favors because it's expected all the time. It's just what you end up doing, and you don't ever get that downtime. Now, I don't do downtime very well myself. I do come home and code, and I code all day, and I do it over the weekends when I can. but that's by choice because I'm trying to do something, not do it for another company.
Yeah, I think one of the things you've hit on there is I think it's called the Scotty principle, named after the security guy in the series and then chief engineer somehow in the movies for the original run of Star Trek. You remember how
Yeah.
in every episode he said, "It can't be done, it can't be done, it can't be done," and then it's done.
Yeah.
By saying that, by being willing to stay alert for 24 hours a day and work incredibly hard and get the work done, you'll get to a point where it, like you say, it's expected of you to work this hard. Or when you say it takes 3 days and it takes longer, then you've slipped, you've become less productive, and the management team will then stop believing you because, well, you said it would take 3 days in the past and you've done it in half an hour. So now I'm not going to listen to your estimates. I'm just going to think everything that I give you, you'll do in half an hour. And like you say, it sets you up with this yeah, like a rod for your own back. It sets you up with this feeling where, well, it doesn't matter because Jamie said he's going to stay until 9 o'clock tonight to do it, so that's fine. So he can stay until 9 o'clock tomorrow night and do it, and stay until 9 o'clock the next night and do it, and he can work over the weekends because he's done it. Like you said, he's done it in the past. He'll do it again.
Yeah, you're not having an accurate burn rate for your team either, are you? It makes it look like the team can get through far more work than they
Yeah.
actually can.
Yeah, there is definitely that, and that falsehood, seeing that the team's doing so much work, and along similar lines, I've had it in the past where there was a P1 issue. The company was burning to the ground, and the whole dev team got pulled into an office and asked why we didn't look panicked and why we weren't working really hard to fix the project, the problem. And we were, but as we put it to the director at the time, we don't need to look like we're working hard. There's no point in us running around like headless chickens going, oh my god, it's on fire. We just get in there, get it done in the time that we have. It's I think it's all about that perception of what is going on is it strongly outweighs what is actually going on by those that don't really understand what we as developers do.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you wouldn't expect, like, if there is a fire, you wouldn't expect the fire department to be running around going, there's a fire, we don't know what to do. You wouldn't expect that because there's a level of professionalism that goes into, right? Okay, get the hoses out or whatever, get the door breaking equipment out, get the suits on, and let's do this. There isn't a run around with your hands above your head screaming that the world's going to end, the sky is falling, because that doesn't project the right image. And whilst you're doing that, you're not doing the thing you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. So point 3, and there's 2 points within this one, and where they got this information from, I don't know. 10x engineer's laptop screen background color is black. Is it? Right, okay. And then the second point is their keyboard keys, such as IFX, are usually worn out more than A, S, and E. Like, what? If anything, the keys that are worn out on my keyboard are Control C, Control V, Delete, Backspace, and Control and Z.
Yeah, definitely backspace. Yeah. Yeah, I find that so I used to do, like, in the day, my screen was like light color theme on Visual Studio, and then by night I have the dark theme. So that's when I'm at home and I'm doing. So it's JavaScript at night and C# in the day. So I do have those different colors, but I wouldn't say that makes me 10x to have a dark.
No.
dark
I don't know where that
background
sits me, because my desktop background is, if you go to the Cynical Developer website, at the top of there's a blue background behind the logo that is code and GUIDs and password and stuff like that. I have that, and it's got the Cynical Developer logo on it. So I'm looking at my own face as my desktop. I use Rider, and that's got a custom background. It's a dark theme, but I've got a custom background, which is also that same desktop picture as well, but faded out. So I spend the day looking at a dark blue version of my own face. So maybe I'm a 10x narcissistic developer. I don't know.
Yeah.
See, whereas with me, I am a fan of dark themes. I do like them because they seem to be easier on my eyes. But then that's personal preference. But the desktop that I'm looking at now, the wallpaper, because I've got it stretched over several monitors, the wallpaper is not a darkened image. It's quite a light, bright image. And the laptops that I use, one of them has the logo for one of my podcasts on it, which is admittedly a dark-ish, like a dark grey, purpley sort of themed image. And the other one is whatever the Windows 10 default image is, because I can't be bothered to change it. So I guess I'm not a 10x engineer either. And because I'm constantly changing between machines and keyboards, I even have a Japanese keyboard because that's one of the things I do is I communicate with my Japanese friends. So telling me that my I, F, and X keys should be worn out is that's not useful at all because those characters aren't the characters I'm typing.
No, I'm not even sure how they came to that, because you sort of trying to think about the syntax that would be. I and F. If you're writing so many if statements, your code's wrong. X, is that because you're cutting code out? S for saving. Select all.
No,
A.
you use X as a variable.
Oh yeah.
X is a variable, isn't it? And I is as well, and F for
Right.
for each.
Yeah. Okay. So
What
you're a
about if
crap
they're
developer because you're not being descriptive with your variable names. Then.
well, maybe they're making a subtle hint there that you're only a good developer if you use Vim because those are the control keys for Vim and Emacs. So
Right. Okay.
maybe they're making
Oh,
a
right.
subtle dig there. And I don't know what
Uh,
A and S and E are supposed to be if you're in emails.
yeah.
But there you go.
No. Okay. So swiftly moving on to number 4. 10x engineers know every line of code that has gone into production. If the QA or support folk alerts an issue, they know precisely where the fault or bug is and can fix them within the same hours versus days. Well, okay, so I can kind of see where this one comes from a little bit, is that when I've built the system from the ground up, I understand every sort of nook and cranny of the system, but they don't tend to be huge systems, so I can actually hold the whole system in my head, if that makes sense. So when stuff does go wrong, I've got a fair idea where that error occurred, but that I wouldn't say that made me a 10x engineer. It just made it apparent that I knew the code base.
Yeah, I have worked with some developers that are like that. That I'm picturing one now where if something went wrong, it'd just look up, and be like, "Oh yeah, I know, yeah, give me a minute," and he'll just go and do it. Maybe he is a 10x developer, but I can also think of times when he takes absolutely ages because he's chatting away. So he's not coding and not 10x in that way, but I can picture him just like solving it really quickly because, like you say, it's in your head. You know the code base, you know it really well.
Yeah, and I've always found it frustrating when I've gone into a new position and I've not been able to get their product in my head fully, because I like to have that big overview of everything, and I do find it frustrating not to have that. But I don't see that as being a downfall to anybody as an engineer. So being able to do all that, I wouldn't say that makes you a better engineer than anybody else, or developer rather than engineer.
I think this one to me betrays a like a actual organizational problem, like a problem with how the company is run. If you have one engineer, a single engineer who knows everything about the code, then you've essentially got, I can't remember the name of the character now. There's a character in the book called the Phoenix Project. I want to say Trent, who essentially is the only person who can do anything with the system. And they end up having to schedule his time and set up people who run interference to stop people from distracting him, because it means that if he's distracted, he can't do the work he's supposed to be doing. So if you have one engineer, or a very small number of engineers on your team who know the code base back to front, what happens if they don't come in that day? You
Yeah, it's a single point of
exactly.
failure,
It
isn't it?
increases your bus factor. So bus factor, for folks who don't know,
Yeah,
is an informal sort of measurement of how well the company can survive if, let's say, I get hit by a bus tomorrow morning. Can the company that I'm contracting with survive without me?
Yeah.
Is my documentation good enough that they can continue working? It sounds like this particular 10x engineer in point four, it means that the company has a bus factor of one, meaning that if that one developer doesn't come into work or is killed or something, then they'll go under. This,
Yep.
it's not a very good position to be in.
No, I've definitely worked places where they've had a developer or multiple developers that have painted themselves into a corner with the software, and they are the only ones that fully understand how it's built. And I think it's not great to be that developer that's done that, but being the company that's let that engineer do that's a problem, and it often points to the fact that the code that's been written is bad code. If nobody else can pick it up and understand what it's doing within at least a couple of hours, it's not fit for purpose, in my humble opinion. Okay. So moving on to the next one. And go ahead, Paul. You read this one.
most of the 10x engineers are full stack engineers. For them, code is code. They don't care whether it is front end, back end, API, database, serverless, etc. I have rarely seen them doing UI work.
Well,
So what
I
does that
think
mean
that
then?
that's really it's hated on UI engineers. I give people a hard time about being a JavaScript developer and stuff, but I don't really mean it. But that really is dogging on them, and it's degrading to them, really, isn't it? It's saying that writing JavaScript in the UI, or doing CSS work or HTML work, or placing buttons for XAML or something like that is not real dev work. I think that's what that
Yeah.
is saying. It's making it a lower class of developer.
Yeah, but it says most of the 10x engineers are full stack engineers. But to me, to be full stack, you've got to be able to do the UI
Yeah.
stuff as well. And but yeah, or maybe they can do it. But yeah, like you say, it's too low down for me. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems to be it's beneath them, but all that points to is that there's a lack in their skill set, that they don't have the ability or they don't have the flair for doing UI, because it's not frivolous. It is a skill, and it is very hard to produce a good looking functional UI, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I'm jealous of people that can turn a Photoshop file into a working fancy website.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, to me, this one has a bit that doesn't make sense to me. So they're saying they don't care whether it's front end code, but they never do UI. Like, what's the front end code if it's not the UI?
Is
I
it
mean,
front end for back end, or back end for front end? Maybe that.
yeah, maybe that's it. Yeah, maybe, but even so, that's still the UI, and like you say, UIs are not easy to work on. Maybe it is a jealousy thing. Maybe it's a um, I don't know. Yeah, maybe I had a point then, and I can't remember what it was. Oh well, I get too old.
It was probably a lie anyway.
Maybe it's jealousy. This person over here, this developer over here can do front end work, and I can't, and that's really upset me because I can do front end, back end, API, database, serverless. I can do microservices. I can do handstands. I can do partridge in a pear tree, but I can't do UI stuff. And I mean, UI stuff is not easy, and we talk about. I mean, Paul, you just mentioned there. You talked about how you're jealous of people. Well, not jealous, but maybe that's the wrong word. But the okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I am.
The
I'm
people who
jealous.
can take a design image, you said Photoshop, but it could be anything, and produce some
Yeah,
kind of front end. Maybe it's HTML and CSS, maybe it's XAML, maybe it's WinForms, maybe it's WCF, whatever. And there is a huge amount of skill there. It's not just, angle brackets, div, angle brackets, apply a bootstrap, and then you're done. There's a lot of work goes into it. So maybe it's more jealousy because CSS, whilst it's easy to pick up, it is ridiculously difficult to master.
yeah, that's it. It's the transitions. It's the bringing that to life, not just making it. Because I can make it look like it did as a flat file, but I can't make it come to life as a real art to it that I don't possess, but I would like to.
Yeah. Well, we've always got bits that we want to work on and improve on as well. But yeah, I don't think dogging on the UI is a particularly nice thing or good thing to do, especially if you're supposed to be this 10x engineer for whatever that means.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so number 6. 10x engineers can convert thought into code in their mind and write it in an iterative fashion. Given a product feature, they can write the entire feature in 1 or 2 sittings of 4 to 6 hours with a caffeinated drink without distraction. And I said distraction very weirdly then. So I'm not sure. Tell me if I'm wrong. But we are all thought workers. We all take thoughts. We look at problems. We solve them in our head. Then we write code and we go, no, that didn't quite do it. We write a little bit more and we go, that didn't quite do it. There we go. And we all iteratively go through that code, and then we go, there we go, feature done. But then to say a feature within 4 to 6 hours, I've been working on a feature set for 12 months for one project. Nobody could have written any of that feature in 4 to 6 hours. Well, they could have done, but it wouldn't have done anything. They might have been able to get the controllers in place, but they couldn't have done the hard work behind it. It's absolute garbage.
Yeah, with this one, I was thinking this sort of developer would be good in a startup, or I think I heard a podcast recently. I can't remember which one it was because I listened to that many, but it could have been on Indie Hackers. But it was one of the guys who used to work for Google, and his job was to work on prototypes all the time. He just used to create a prototype for something, and then that would be like the minimum viable product. They would get to test it out and see if this idea was any good. And he didn't have to care about the quality of the code or whether it was testable or any of that. He just got to be creative with this code, knock something out really quickly, get it to an audience that will test the idea, and then see if it's a goer or not. And if it is, it would be started again from the ground up with the knowledge that this is actually something that's worth doing. So I think a 10x developer in that position is definitely worthwhile. This sort of developer, if they exist.
Yeah. I could see where you're coming from with that, and some of those projects. But I think 4 to 6 hours isn't very long. Now 4 to 6 hours, you could bang out a single feature which does one single little tiny thing, but it's not going to be a complex business process in that 4 to 6 hours, and that's what I would look at as a feature, and that's the sort of thing that I'd want my sort of top devs on. If it was something that was going to be completed in 4 to 6 hours in a single sitting, I'd probably give that to some of the less experienced developers. I don't know whether that's me being biased or what against skill sets, but that's how I would have divvied that task out.
See, whereas to me, right, if someone is willing to sit still for 4 to 6 hours and only willing to work if they won't be distracted, and they're going to produce an entire feature in that time, that's like you haven't got a healthy person on your team. You're sitting stock still for 4 to 6 hours. You need to get up and have a walk around. I don't know about you guys, but there will be periods of time when I get stuck, and what I do when I can't figure something out, I literally get up out of my chair and go for a walk around the office, or go for a walk and stand outside or something, because that change in context helps to sort of just unlock something in my subconscious subconscious brain. But then, 4 to 6 hours, I've spent about that much time writing unit tests for something before I've even started it. It's
Yeah.
just, it's ridiculous.
It's the sort of behaviour that you see in a hackathon during the night when the others are sleeping, and maybe one of us might have just been spending this 4 to 6 hours still coding. I can't think of who that might
No,
be.
no idea. I think there was some bitterness in that there, but I think maybe there's another show in that.
It definitely wasn't
No,
healthy, was it?
Definitely not. Yeah. So, point 7. 10x engineers rarely look at help documentation of classes or methods. They know it in memory and can recall it from memory. They write code at the same ease as writing English. No breaks, no pause, just type.
If I'm honest, that sounds like a great tagline for a movie. If you were going to make a movie about computer programmers and try and make it really interesting, you put a couple of whams in there and a couple of symbol crashes, no breaks, no pause, just type. That would get me in the cinema like that. But this is just nonsense.
Yeah. To me, I'm thinking of Jeff, the guy who goes to IKEA. He comes home with the flat pack. He doesn't read the instructions. Before you know it, she's gone to make a drink and he's already built it.
But he's built a coffee table, and what she bought was a chest of drawers. Yeah. Now, I'll admit that documentation, when I pick up something new, I don't read the documentation properly. I'll skim it and then I'll start coding with it, but I will refer to the documentation as I work on it. So one of my side projects at the moment, I'm using Vuetify, and I'm writing it obviously in Vue. I've not done a lot with Vue. I've done nothing with Vuetify before, but as I'm going, I'm reading the documentation, which, yes, it's not the best approach to it because it does slow you right down. Whereas I think if I'd read the documentation first, I'd have a fair idea where I was going and what I needed to do. But if I'd sat there and not read any of the documentation and just tried to write the code, I would never have got it done.
Yeah, you need an index, don't you, in your head of what the features are that it can do.
Yeah, and that sort of takes me back to my first dev job. I worked with one guy, and I would always get stuck, and I'd say to him, "Oh, I want to do this and I want to do that. How do I do it?" And he'd go, "Well, I'm not sure, but I think this is the namespace that you need, and it's like this." And I'd look and go, "Wow, one day I want to be that good." Where I sort of know where about stuff is. I didn't even have any inkling that there would be something like ReSharper that you could go and do. I'm using after I type something and it go and work it out for you. We didn't have Stack Overflow and stuff like that back then. So it just blew my mind, and having that all in your head was great. And I think you get that from being a developer for a long time and working well with it, but you never get it from not reading the documentation. This episode is sponsored by the PVS-Studio team, who promote static code analysis methodology in general, and its PVS-Studio tools in particular. Static code analyzers allow you to find bugs in source code in the development stages. This helps to reduce the costs of fixing them. PVS-Studio performs code analysis and issues warnings on the fragments of code with a high probability of having bugs and potential vulnerabilities in them. The tools support C, C++, C#, and Java, and it can work with Visual C++, GCC, Clang compilers, and some of those for embedded systems. The analyzers work on Windows, Linux, and macOS as a standalone tool and integrated into Visual Studio, IntelliJ IDEA, and SonarQube. In the show notes, you will find links to the PVS-Studio website and the article Technologies Used in the PVS-Studio Code Analyzer for Finding Bugs and Potential Vulnerabilities. Now go check it out.
Oh, definitely. I mean, all of that comes from experience. We talked off air earlier on about Ardalis, also known as Steve Smith, right? He does weekly coding streams where he's working on something, right? And same thing happens with Jeff Fritz, right? Jeff Fritz works for Microsoft and is, I believe, one of the program managers on the .NET team. Steve Smith is, I believe, independent, but he wrote most of the documentation for ASP.NET Core. Both of those constantly look things up in the documentation, and it's Jeff's job to make sure that you and I and James and Jeff and Biff and Sarah or whoever is having the best time that they can do with .NET Core or .NET technologies. It's not looking at not having to look at documentation is not a sign of someone who's better than someone else. It's just, for me, that's someone who's had a lot of experience of using that API surface. And I think there's an argument for knowing the whole of the documentation, but then there's also the argument for, okay, so how's this, right? James, I'm going to give you an Angular 7 app, right? All I want you to do is change where the Angular app calls to on the API surface in the web API. Do you need to know exactly the intimate details of how Angular works, or do you just need to know where to look to change that value?
I just need to know where to look to change the value.
Exactly. So there's an argument for knowing it all, and there's an argument for knowing enough to do the current job that you're doing. And I, for one, I don't care if I'm working with someone and they got to look something up. I'm constantly hitting F12 in my Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code or Rider or whatever to go to the available documentation for the APIs that I'm working with, even APIs I've worked with hundreds and thousands of times, because I'm now using them potentially in a way that I haven't used them before. So I might be using string equals and throwing on a comparison, or I might be using a where clause on some new data type that I don't quite figure out. I can't quite hold in my head all of the properties. So I'm going to go to the documentation for that class or that type and figure it out whilst I'm there. Not I'm just going to intimately know all of the details, because I mean, especially the kind of work I'm in, 3 months later, I'm not going to, 6 months later, a year later, I'm not going to need to know that information. So I don't think that someone who knows the documentation back to front is any better than someone who doesn't, because like you said, we've got Stack Overflow now, we've got Google, we've got Bing, whatever you want to search the web with, we've got interactive tools to pull up that documentation whilst we're doing it, and it pulls up just the bit of the documentation you need. So spending weeks learning the entirety of the .NET framework just to be able to change a color of a button in HTML and CSS, I think is a bit of, it's not wasted time because it improves your knowledge of the whole thing, but for that particular task, huge waste of time.
Yeah, definitely. Have you got any points to make on that, Paul?
Well, no. I mean, I think what they're trying to say is that they don't need it. They consumed it already. The first time that they used it, they learned it all. Like that film Short Circuit, I flicked through the book and it's like
Johnny Five need more input.
That's the one. Yes.
Yeah.
that awesome film that is in no way at all slightly racist.
Oh no, definitely.
Is it? I don't know.
You go back and watch it, and then come back. It's quite disturbing, actually. Obviously, back in the 80s or early 90s, whenever it came out, it wasn't seen as that. But I think you'll be astonished. It's one of those stupid, useless facts that I astound people with. Anyway, the next point that is made, I think, is a complete contradiction of the previous point. 10x engineers are always learning new frameworks, languages, ahead of everyone in the company. They are not afraid of anything new. If there is something new, example, blockchain, ding, 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 they gobble up, set up, experiment before anyone else is getting started. Well, how have they got that far ahead of everyone else if they haven't read the bloody documentation?
Yeah, it's true. It is a contradiction, but I think the attitude of some developers will want to come across that they already know it. They'll hate the thought that someone else is learning something that they've not looked at yet because they're so deep into the code of what they were writing in for 4 to 6 hours. Yeah. With the rate that new frameworks get released, like you've already mentioned on the podcast before, James, they're in that 4 to 6 hours, how many JavaScript frameworks got released and died?
Yeah, I think there's been 45 released and 6 have died just in the recording of this show.
Exactly. But they're saying that they know the ins and outs of all of them. I think that's just an attitude problem, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the thing is, there's an argument for learning about new frameworks and techniques and languages and new technology, but I don't think that I say this as someone who spent months learning enough about .NET Core to show it off at my previous job, and became the .NET Core guy at my previous job. But that was me wanting to know about it. I didn't see I need to monetize this. I need to bring this into work. I need to do this, that, and the other with it. This was, hey, there's this new technique, and I can. So I mean, for people who don't know, I don't run Windows on my main computer, so writing .NET apps was always really difficult for me. So the fact that there was this cross-platform version of .NET that I could run, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna read that. I'm gonna write in that. I'm gonna spend some time sort of helping the teams figure out what the issues are. But I think there's always an argument for learning about them, but not learning them. So, like, the difference there is knowing that there is Angular, there is Vue, there is React. There are families of technologies that hang off of those. There are schisms within those technologies. Some people think you should do it this way. Some people think you should do it that way, and that there are different languages and tools and techniques. Knowing that they exist rather than knowing the intimate details of them, I think makes you slightly more adaptable because
Yeah, this is the T-shape
exactly
developer,
right.
isn't it? So, like yourself, you've got the general knowledge of a lot of different frameworks and languages, but you've gone deep on the .NET Core stuff.
Exactly.
So that's your
Yeah,
T-shape, isn't
and
it?
I think that helps in that you can then, when you come across a problem, you can say, right, okay, we can still use, let's say, .NET 4.6 and use MVC, or we can take a look at, I don't know, Ruby on Rails, because this project doesn't need to have all of the things that .NET gives us. It doesn't need to run on Windows, for instance, or you're looking at a project from a 10,000 foot level and going, okay, we're building an incredibly stupidly overpowered microservices based thing that uses the blockchain and uses 12,000 other keywords that show up on a LinkedIn search query. When all the customer really wants is a brochure website which can be statically generated using JBake or Hugo or Jekyll, and just knowing that these technologies exist rather than knowing the intimate details helps you to go, we're doing this wrong, chaps, or we're doing this wrong, folks. Maybe we should reevaluate where we are and what we're doing.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And it's as you say, it's all about knowing that this technology exists, and it's one of the things that I try and promote with the podcast. I don't expect everybody to remember every piece of technology we talk about, but it puts that little bit of knowledge that you know that technology is out there if you ever have a problem that it may solve. Um, and I think everybody that is trying to learn every new framework, every new language that's out there, I always refer to that as CV or resume driven development. And I've seen projects where that has been really apparent in every developer, and every little piece of it is made with something different because during the development process something new came out and they use that. And it just makes for unmaintainable code, unmaintainable projects. And for what at the end of the day becomes a product that is unusable by the client and unmaintainable as well.
Exactly. Exactly. And you have to remember that I think it's in Code Complete. Steve McConnell says that, our prime directive to steal another thing from the Star Trek universe, I guess. I'm really showing my geeky, nerdy side this evening. But our main goal as developers is to write code for other developers, not for the computer, because the compiler and the build tools are going to step in and do things to our code that it's just beyond. I mean, most of the compilers and toolchains are built programmatically now. So the things that the compilers and the toolchains could do are basically beyond human understanding at this point. But it's not a computer that's going to come along and fix a bug. It's another human being who's going to come along and fix a bug. So if you're writing code that someone else doesn't understand, you know, how is that maintainable?
Yeah. Yeah, I did wonder where you were going to go with that Star Trek thing. Then I thought you were going to say that it was it's our job to go boldly go where no man has gone before.
Well, I am
But
bold, so
Me too. Yeah.
maybe that should be number 12. Number 12, 10x engineers have no hair on their head.
Yeah.
So number 9 really annoys me. And I'll read it out first. And 10x engineers are poor mentors as they can't teach others on what to do or parcel their work. They always think it takes too long to teach or discuss with others. I would rather do it myself. They are poor at interviews. They are also poor interviewers. Well, as a podcast host that is out there trying to help people, this is what I want to mentor people. I want to help them. I want you to improve by listening to this show. I want you to better your career. And I think any developer that is out there, regardless if this is first day, if this is second day as a developer, you're always going to be 1 day, 2 days, half a day in front of somebody else. So you can always help someone else. So you are always a mentor. Anybody that I think refuses to mentor other developers or says, "Oh, I can't do that, I'm no good at it," they're not a team player and they're toxic for your team. They're not a good thing to have.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got the same opinion. I'm all about sharing code with my blog of Code Share and trying to help others because I don't know. I put myself in their shoes and I wish that someone would have shown me how to do the thing that I just learned. Like I'm Googling for something, I didn't find it. I went through a world of pain to find out, and then I'll try and explain it in a blog post or in a video so that when someone else comes along, it was nice and easy. Or it gives them an introduction into something and they like it just as much as I do. And then, you get that feeling of, yeah, this is brilliant. I've taught someone something and now they're really passionate about it as well. Like helping other people is part of being a good team player, I think.
absolutely. I mean, you touched on it there. You touched on it there, Paul. In a previous life, I know that James has used this phrase before. In a previous life, I was a teacher, and seeing there's like a level of joy that comes from that first-hand experience of sitting with someone and saying, right, this is how this works. This is how Pythagorean theorem works, and let's get some squares and we'll make a triangle, and I will show you how we work it out. The example I always give is I was working with some students and I was trying to teach them how to work out the circumference of a circle, and we started by making up words for stuff. We didn't start with here's a radius, this is the formula, let's do this. I was like, okay, let's pretend we need to come up with a word that describes the gap between the middle of a circle and the end of a circle, and we came up with a word and we used that for the rest of the lesson. We did the same with the circumference, a different word, and then we worked on this theory that, well, there's this ratio between the radius and the circumference, or whatever we called it. And then I got a bike out and I put a clicker on my wheel and we walked around the school, and then we measured the radius of the wheel, and through the radius of the wheel we figured out how far we'd walked because of the amount of times the clicker went through. And these kids just, their minds were blown. It's this, instead of learning this one piece of here's a formula, learn it by rote, it's this whole experience that they're now going to remember, hopefully for a long time. I mean, most of them only remembered it for 30 seconds, but that's not the point. But it's seeing that joy of them going, oh my goodness, I totally get this. And you only get that feeling when you teach someone else. And then on the other side of the coin, right, in teaching we talk about levels of thinking. If you can understand it yourself, that's the I hate to use this phrase, but the lowest level of thinking on something. But when you get to a point where you can explain it to someone else in your own words and have them understand it, you've reached the highest level of thinking, because it sort of backs up the way that you're thinking about it. It backs up your intimate knowledge of this one thing, and it reinforces it, so that then when you come to look at it again, you can either think of the dictionary definition for whatever you've done, or look at how you explained it for someone else, and you get that it's like that reinforcing. So in your in your brain you've got these axons and dendrites and all this kind of stuff, and the more that you explain something to someone in a slightly different way, the stronger those connections become, and the longer you will actually retain that knowledge. So actively saying, I'm not going to teach others, is not just harming the other people and the team around you, it's harming yourself, because you're not going to remember that information that you've spent a whole weekend learning the entire documentation for everything to do with .NET and Entity Framework and, I don't know, Dapper and Ninject and all this kind of stuff. And unless you share that information, you're never going to remember it yourself. So you're harming yourself and others.
No, but she will, because she's telling
Well,
us.
yeah.
Yeah. So on to point 10 of the laughable points about about developers. 10x engineers don't hack things. They write quality code and know exactly how the code has to evolve and have a mental model of overall code structure. They write, at most, one design document, and the rest is in the code. So that last bit, they write at most one design document and the rest is in code. I've rarely worked anywhere that writes any documentation regardless of one document, but that's a different complaint. Engineers don't hack things. Rubbish, absolute rubbish. Everybody hacks stuff at times, because what are the 3 points? It's cost, time, and quality, and you can only ever have 2 of those. So it's normally quality that gets dropped, because it's always about cost and time, really. You never know how the code has to evolve fully. You may have an idea of where it's going to go, but knowing exactly, I think, is that's an ego trip again, more than anything. I don't think it's a reality.
Yeah, this one makes me think like you've got a time traveling alien on your team. You've got someone who knows exactly how the code is going to evolve in 6 months, so they know how the project is going to change. They know what the requirements are going to be, and they also don't write any. They write one design documentation, one design document, sorry, and everything else is documented in code. Well, yeah, I guess we kind of lean towards that with Agile, but let's be honest, there's always going to be some form of documentation, and yes, it's always going to be out of date, but there's always going to be something. A new developer coming into this situation where there's no documentation whatsoever, and only one person knows how the code needs to look in 6 months' time. How are they supposed to build new features? How are they supposed to fix bugs if only one person knows how this system is going to look in 6 months?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then they're not hacking things, right? If you follow test-driven development, the first thing you do is you write a failing test. Then you write some code which makes the test pass, not write the code which implements the feature. So you've hacked it to make it pass the test. And then you write another test which adds a tiny amount of feature, which then fails. So then you hack the code to make it pass that test. Everything we do is hacks upon hacks upon hacks in that respect. I mean, yeah, we go back later on and clean it up and apply engineering processes to it, but almost everything we do, at least in a X-driven development style, is get the X bit first and then worry about getting the features in place. So everything is hacking.
Yeah, definitely is. And day to day, I think everybody hacks everything together. I don't think there is any other way to do it. I don't think I've ever sat down and known exactly what I'm going to write and how I'm going to write it and how it's going to be used. It's just not a reality, I don't think. So the final point, point 11, 10x engineers rarely job hunt or move out of the company. They move out because you make their lives miserable with processes, meetings, training, and other non-value add activities. If you come across them, hold them, celebrate them. Now, that just sounds like somebody doesn't want to develop their career, doesn't want to push themselves forward. They're in a happy little, nice, comfortable position that they've put themselves into. They're pretty happy with what they want to do, and the job that they're in allows them that comfort just to do whatever the hell they like. And making somebody's life miserable by adding processes, training them up, and having them sit in meetings, your life must be pretty damn peachy if a process, training, or a meeting makes you miserable. I think you need to take a long, hard look at your life and give yourself a flipping wobble, because that shouldn't make anybody miserable. Oh no, they got to train me and make me better at something. Oh, the horror of it. What on earth are they on about?
I've definitely worked with people that are like, I don't know, they are the single point of failure. They do have all the knowledge, the business knowledge, which is, I mean, that is an asset, I suppose. If they've got the business knowledge, it's all right knowing about the code and how the code was written, and not all right, you didn't document it, but you can't always document business knowledge. So I've worked with people like that, and they do get protected because the company is like, well, if they're not happy, then we're screwed, sort of thing. So I've definitely seen that happen. Like, they do get excused from meetings and training and things that is seen to not be valuable to that individual who is considered 10x. So I've definitely seen it happening in a business before, but I definitely don't agree with
those
it.
people are always considered 10x by the business that doesn't really understand what it is that developers do as a job. They're scared of probably the power they think that these people in their teams possess, and they don't realize that if these guys walk or girls walk out of the department today, the business will still operate tomorrow, and they can go and get somebody else that will come in and be able to pick it up and run with it. They just have to find the right person. And there's a lot of us out there that can write code and can read code. It's not hard. Well, it is hard, but it's not that difficult that you can't pick something up. Even the worst code you can understand to a point.
Most definitely. I mean, so there's an argument for, I'm going to do one thing, I'm going to do it very well, and that's all I'm ever going to do, and that's perfectly fine. If that's how you feel, then more power to you. But that to me tells me that the company that this person works for uses a specific set of templates, using a very specific language or subset of languages, using a very specific set of frameworks, using a very specific set of technologies to solve any problem. Now, the problem with that is that, I mean, we all know, and the listeners will all know, that there's no one technology or framework or even language or even pattern that solves every single problem. So this means, yeah, but but this means that at some point, this 10x engineer is going to come across a problem that they can't solve using the templates that they've set up for their projects, and the languages and the frameworks and the technologies and the tools and the processes, and all of this stuff is not going to work when they come up against, let's say, their system needs to, let's say, let's come up with an example. Right. Okay. So let's say this particular 10x engineer has worked in ASP.NET, MVC with Web API Entity Framework their entire lives, which is not a problem. That is absolutely fine. A lot of us do that, right? But let's now say that the client comes to them and says, we need a system that has to be statically generated. It needs to be generated ahead of time, and all of the files need to be served as quickly as possible for reasons that match our business process, whatever that business process is. Well, MVC isn't going to cut it, because every time you need to, like ASP.NET MVC isn't going to cut it, because every time you issue an update to the system, well, you've got to wait 10 to 40 to maybe 70 seconds for the system just to start. And then for each of those initial requests, even if you're caching stuff and you're not generating files on disk, that cache has to be built up. And then what happens when the data gets old? You then have to scrub the cache and start again. But then it's not statically generated. So then you go, okay, I'm going to take this MVC patterns thing and somehow shoehorn in statically generated pages for every single request. It can be done, and I have had to do it in the past. But it's bending that technology to make it do something that is the antithesis of what it has to do, and forcing yourself to do that when you could just as easily install whatever it was that I mentioned earlier on, all of these statically generated systems, JBake, Hugo, whatever they are, that just using those is probably better, and having to learn to use those is probably better than spending 6 months trying to figure out why you can't squeeze that last bit of performance out of the software. And, being offered training and other activities to help you cohese more with the team, I think, is always a good thing. And I'm saying that coming in as a contractor who doesn't stay in the same team for more than 6 months at a time. Being able to sort of sit with the people that you work with on a daily basis and really connect with them and figure out how it is that this person works and how I can approach that person. There's something that I talk about all the time where it's like, not all of us have a computer science background. So if I go into a meeting with a fellow developer and they've come from a code camp, or they're self-taught, and I start talking about bubble sort and insertion sort, or any kind of other algorithmic stuff, it may go completely over their heads and it may make them feel uncomfortable and not want to talk to me. So you need to find out who that other person is, and you sometimes can't do that in a work environment. You have to do it in a training environment, in a team building environment. So actively saying, I don't want to work with these people outside of my own work. Like you said earlier on, James, you're not a team player. You're not trying to help to get this whole thing to, you're not trying to deliver the product. The reason we use the word team is because we are a team. Yeah, there might be the person who kicks the ball into the goal, or whatever sports metaphor you want, but that one person would not be able to kick the ball into the goal were it not for everyone else on the team helping them out.
Yeah. Yeah, and something that has always comes up in development is that we are standing on the shoulders of giants, and without those giants, we wouldn't be able to reach those lofty heights. So we're all standing on each other's shoulders to get there. And if you don't work together, then you're never going to achieve the greatness that you want. So we've spent the last hour debunking everything that tweet or series of tweets has put out as a 10x developer. Now, what I wanted to consider and have a chat about was, in your opinion, what makes a good developer? What would someone have to do to be considered a good developer and earn your respect in a team that you worked in?
If it's okay, I'll go first. What I see as a good developer is someone who is helping the team. So, say if you're working in a team and you're getting, say you work, you've got your support board and you've got your sprint work as well. That person that wants to help the whole team move their tickets across the board as a team. It doesn't matter whether they are just focusing on their work personally. They're more bothered about the team succeeding, and I think that's what I respect as a developer.
Yeah. Someone that facilitates the team to be better isn't in it solely for themselves and the glory that brings to them, because we all know that there is no glory in software development. There's a small amount maybe now and again, but it's very, very short-lived before something blows up, and then you don't even want to be in the same building as you were 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, also someone who will take the blame for something that perhaps was, someone else in the team, but they're willing to take the flak for that, and then they will share the credit and give the credit to others, even though maybe they really did it, but actually they'll allow the team or the other members of the team to take some of the credit for it. I think it's good traits.
Yeah, I think you pretty much hit on all the same things that I would have said there, Paul, because it's like I said earlier on, and I feel like I've been talking way too much during this recording, but it's all about being that team player. Like I said earlier on, if you go with the sports metaphor, there is that one person who's going to put that ball in that goal, or take that hand egg and put it over the line and get, score that try, or whatever it is that is the goal. Someone's going to hit that goal, but it's not just that one person, it's everyone else around them. Just being able to, I think, being able to spot when someone on the team isn't having the best time and just trying to sort of nudge them and say, hey, is there anything I could do to help? I can see that maybe you're struggling with this, or maybe it looks like you're having trouble with it and I just don't know you. Is there a way that I could help you out somehow? Is there a way I can maybe sit with you and say, even if I can't code, even if I can't do the problem, just let me sit next to you and you tell me what the problem is, and you will figure it out. Trust me, because it's rubber duck debugging and people have been doing it since the 60s and it works. Just sit and talk to me. Or hey, okay, so I don't know how to use this particular library or tool. Would you mind coming and showing me how to do it? Because I could look it up, but it might be quicker if you come and sit with me and say, right, okay, the documentation says all of this stuff and you don't need to know it, but what you need to know is you need to put a semicolon there and it'll just work.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the rubber duck methodology, to the point where I'm currently talking with my swag guy to see if I can get some cynical developer rubber ducks made. So we'll see what comes about from that. But yeah, as we've said, facilitating everybody in the team to succeed as a team. Not letting the small lumps of brown stuff roll downhill is a very good indicator of a good leader, I think. A good team lead, or even just a good developer who wants to see the team succeed, because a lot of places boast that we're it's not a blame culture here. We don't blame anybody. But as soon as the small bits of brown stuff hit the fan, the fingers start getting pointed. But when you're in a team with very good developers, they will all stand up all in one go and say, look, yeah, it was a problem. We screwed up. Let's fix it. And the key takeaway from that is the word we. We screwed up. Not Jamie screwed up or Paul screwed up or James screwed up. We screwed up as a team. Let's fix it together.
And I think adding on to the end of that, and figure out how we can stop it from happening again is important too.
Yeah.
That learning from, okay, so we did mess up as a team, but what is it that led to that messing up? And can we maybe put a process or a test or something in place that will stop it from happening, or give us some kind of early warning that, hey, we're heading down this path again, and remember what happened last time. And then that potentially makes you all better at the work that you do, because you can see, oh, hey, the last time that we did a null check here and we did if equals null, just return blank, well, we ended up with a blank page that was indexed by Google that was just an empty page, whereas we should have maybe logged an error in our tracking system and displayed a friendly message to the user that says this page is temporarily unavailable, with a 302, a temporary redirect back to the page that they were just on, so that then that error page is not indexed or something. That may or may not be a real thing that happened.
Let's learn from
yeah,
that.
exactly. And that's the whole point. You've got to really try to look at in science, we talk about this idea that any result is not necessarily a bad result. A positive result for a hypothesis, a positive result is as good as a negative result, because it means that, yes, if it's a positive result, yes, you found the thing, you figured it out, you've solved the problem. But if it's a negative result, you can go, yes, okay, this path doesn't lead to the solution. This is a positive thing. No one else ever has to do this, because I've just done it and proved that you can't get to the answer from here. So let's take another path, And I suppose that's a bit, I don't know what the phrase would be, that sort of glass half full, I guess, that positive outlook, not necessarily a cynical outlook, but as long as you have that outlook, then, you and your team are going to be fine. As long as you can say, look, that didn't work, let's figure out why it didn't work, and then maybe document it or put a process in place or talk to someone, maybe some training. You see, we're talking about point 11 there, the process and the training and the documentation. Maybe we could do something that makes it not happen again.
Yeah. And now all the listeners out there, I think if they're listening to this podcast, they undoubtedly listen to other podcasts. And, we talked about, we've got Paul on who runs codeshare.co.uk, and he's got his YouTube channel, and he's telling people about how to do all this cool stuff. And with Jamie, you're the .NET Core podcast guy, and you're telling everybody how cool .NET Core is and how to use it and how to solve all these problems. And I'm on here on the Cynical Developer talking about all these problems and how people should get over them and things to do. And there's all these new technologies you should know about. And I think they put us on pedestals as content creators that were some sort of godlike developers. Now, granted, thank you to Dylan Beatty, I am now a certified rockstar developer. And if you want to find out what that is, go and have a look on LinkedIn. I'll leave that as a task for you. But would either of you consider yourselves to be 10x developers or rockstar developers?
I wouldn't, not myself. I just think that I'm always learning. I'm curious and I'm eager and I'm resourceful, but I wouldn't say I was a 10x developer.
Me either. And if I look at this list again, right, you've got someone who is miserable in their job, doesn't want to learn new technology, doesn't want to work with new people, wants their computer set up in a very specific way, doesn't come into the office on time, is the only person who knows how the system is going to work, and is the only person who knows how to implement the system. That's not someone I want to be. That sounds like a not very nice person to be around.
Yeah, I think a better title for that should be 11 reasons that you are a bad developer.
Yeah. Or maybe not bad developer, but bad team player, definitely.
Yeah. You might be able to write the code, I guess, but you're definitely toxic in some way, shape, or form. That's not to say you can't be better, that you can't improve, and you can't stop that attitude. But you're not in the right headspace that you should be if you prescribe, I think, to any of those. And to sort of like flip that question around onto myself, I definitely don't see myself as a 10x developer. If anything, on a daily basis, I doubt myself. I'm my own worst critic, I know that. But I will often sit there, and if I've got a problem and I can't fix it, I think, oh, what am I doing? Why am I even trying to do this job? They're going to find out that I'm a fraud. But I'm like 15 years into a career and still going strong. So I've got to have something about me somewhere. Maybe I'm just very good at blagging my way through. I don't know. But yeah, definitely not a 10x developer by any stretch of the imagination. And I don't think I've ever worked with anybody where I've thought they're definitely 10x. I've definitely worked with a lot of people that I think, my God, you are a good developer. I would like to be as good as you one day, but you never think that there is somebody out there that knows everything. I think it's impossible to know everything. And every day is a school day with being a developer. If you're not of the mindset that you want to learn something new, I think you're in the wrong career. So we've all got our own little ways of working and things like that. How do you try to be better as a developer? Do you use any specific tactics or any practices or anything like that maybe the listeners could actually take on or twist to work for them? I don't know, Paul, do you want to take that?
So what I try and do is I try and listen to as many technical podcasts that I can. I would like to say I follow tutorials and things like that for saying that I write them, but I don't. I'd like to watch more Pluralsight videos. If I was giving someone advice, I'd probably advise that they do things like that, or YouTube. Be interested in something. Try and create a simple version of something that you know. Like James likes to advise about creating a podcast player app, is it? And just like try and create that, and there's so many different things to it, and then you try and learn those different parts. And I like to learn by doing, and I have fun by doing. Like, I don't play games anymore. My brain feels guilty if I spend time playing video games. It wants to go off and write code, and that's how I express myself, and that's how I'm creative. I didn't realize I was creative. I didn't think developers were creative until I took a step back and looked at it. But yeah, I would just say have fun with it, play with it. Maybe do the 100 days of code and do different things like that. You don't have to do every day one after the other. Follow hashtags on Twitter about 100 days of code or about the technology stack that you're interested in. And definitely share what you're learning as well. If you can knock up a quick blog, you don't have to actually build the blog, but at least if you're writing articles on it, then it works to teach other people that, like James said, you might be a few steps ahead of them. So it teaches those people that were a bit behind you, but also it helps you learn it, like Jamie said. And you can always look back at your notes as well. So yeah, that's what I would say on the matter.
I think for me, for me personally, there's only really two things that I try to ascribe to. And unfortunately, one of them does include a name drop, so I apologize for that in advance. But the first one is being curious. Not everyone can do this, but just sort of figuring out, sitting there and saying, well, why? When I remember when I was a kid, we didn't really have many toys, but we had an old rotary dialing phone, and my dad gave me a screwdriver once, and that was it. That was my afternoon, taking this thing to pieces and figuring out, well, what is okay? So now I've taken the cover off. Oh wait, there's a bunch of wires that connect the cover to this other gubbins. What's all this about? And honestly, it kept me entertained for hours just taking this thing to. I never put it back together again, but I took it to pieces, and I was like, oh, well, what's that cable for? And what's this? And how does this work? And bless him, my dad sat there and told me what he knew about electronics and how all the components fit together and all that kind of stuff. And it's just being curious. It doesn't have to be about technology either, just learning something new and then maybe trying to apply that in your daily practice, in your daily life. One of the things that I try to do is I try to be a little bit more productive. So I do these little things every week where I'll sit back and I'll go, right, I worked on this thing for 4 hours. Could I have done it better somehow? Is there some process I could have put in place? Is there? So we talked about the fact that I do have a podcast. I'm not going to shill it. I'm not going to tell you all about it. But one of the things that I do is at the beginning of the podcast, I literally say these words: .NET new podcast. And if I type that into my command prompt on my computer, it generates all of the files for me for a podcast episode. It generates the show notes, generates the recording files, everything that I need, because I noticed I'm spending hours setting it up every time I want to do a recording. Well, why don't I just do a couple of keystrokes and have the computer do it for me in 300 milliseconds? That saves me 4 hours a week, 4 hours a month, whatever the time period is. So being curious is incredibly useful. Just sort of looking at something, picking it up and rotating it around and going, well, why does it work like that? I mean, you can't do that particularly with software, but just looking at well, what's jQuery and why does that exist in place of JavaScript? If JavaScript exists, why do we need jQuery? Or if Angular exists, why do we need React? And looking at the sort of 10,000 foot level of why does this thing exist when this other thing already exists? And realizing that it's not that one's better than the other or one is worse than the other, it's just different ways of thinking about the same problem. And then the other thing, which unfortunately, like I joked about earlier on, does kind of require a name drop. So I remember talking to Richard Campbell once, and he talks about how he likes to practice ontological humility, which is this act of looking at a situation and trying to realize and rectify the fact that what you're seeing and hearing may not be the truth of what's happening. The way that you're experiencing it is shaping how you are perceiving it. So if you're sitting in a meeting and you're getting really upset because you're not getting any work done, like this 10x developer, well, they might be feeling upset and angry because they're not getting any work done, but everyone else in the meeting is getting something done because they're discussing the issues and the problems. And maybe that developer doesn't need to be there, but for everyone else, it's an incredibly productive meeting. Or maybe this particular 10x engineer doesn't want to go on that team building exercise, but everyone else does because it helps them to bond better and for them to get on better in the office. Or maybe the 10x engineer goes, why do I need to do this in Ruby on Rails when I could be doing it in MVC? Well, maybe Ruby on Rails is slightly better fitted to this particular system. Or maybe it's completely the opposite. Maybe everyone around you is thinking that it will fit better with this particular problem, but you know that it's not. And being able to sort of step back and go, I think I get why they're thinking this, or I think I get why this is happening, and I want to try and put my point across in the friendliest way and in the calmest way and in the best way to get my point across. Just being able to sort of step back and say, hey, folks, I think call and the other thing as well is being willing to sound stupid. I'll quite often say, hey, I know this is a stupid question, but have you considered this? And then I'll get the rationale as to why we're not doing that particular thing. And then it just all clicks. Right, I get why we're doing this now, because the idea I just had is stupid or not productive because of these reasons.
Yeah. Don't be afraid of the 5 whys, and that's I believe that is that whenever anybody is telling you how or why something is done a certain way, you have to ask them why 5 times before you actually get to the bottom of why something is done. And it's all about being curious. And I think, at least for me, at the end of the day, the most important thing about being a good developer or a great developer is you. It's your mindset. And how you approach your career or your job, however you want to term that. You know, it may be an impossible task to be that top 1% of coder, whatever word you want to use, but who really wants or who really needs to be that 1% developer? I think anyone that takes a solid interest in writing software and solving problems, you're going to be a decent developer. You might not be the best developer right now, but you're definitely going to improve as long as you keep that mindset. If you don't want to become a great dev, then nobody can really help you become any better. You know, it's all down to you and what you want to do. And like I said earlier about myself, you know, you are your own worst enemy, and you shouldn't aim to be the best developer. You should simply aim to be maybe the best developer that you can be, you know, better than you were yesterday. I'm often told I work too much, I do too much, I'm always chasing the next big thing in my plans. But if I set my mind to do something, I will do it. And if someone says I won't do it, then it makes me more determined to do it. And that's all about my mindset of being able to achieve something and become better than I was yesterday. One of my favorite quotes, and I'm going to 10x the quotes and the name drops here that Jamie was doing. But one of my favorite quotes, which you can find on the footer of my business's website, is from Grant Cardone, and it's "Be obsessed or be average." And I think that sums it up so amazingly as a developer. You have to be obsessed about what we do, because it's not necessarily something you do 9 to 5. You go away and you look at this and you look at that and you read something or you watch something or you think about something while you're watching TV, and it's just constantly going. It's not a job that it just switches off. And I think John Sonmez from The Simple Programmer, or originally from The Simple Programmer, had a very similar motto, which was the bulldog mindset, and that's become his newest venture's name. But it was all about chomping at that bit and not stopping till you get it. You know, it's all about being hungry and wanting to be better and be more than you are today. And I think that for me is the best way that you can improve and be that better developer. And I think to finish on one last quote, I think it's from Keenan and Kel, but someone can quote me, correct me if I'm wrong. But it could even be Saved by the Bell actually. But I'm showing my age a little bit now. But stop being a human being and become a human doing. And it's all about that, getting out there and doing stuff. Because rather than hoarding everything to yourself, it's better to be out there doing things with your team, helping your team. Maybe today you didn't get that bit of work done, but you actually facilitated 6 other people in the team to get their stuff done. And on the surface, it looks like you didn't do anything yesterday, but in reality, you did. And I think it's all about that. It's all about perception. We did touch on it earlier. It's perception from the business, but being able to tell the business that this is how the real thing is. This is how the situation actually occurred. I think is a good trait to work on. And I think on that little rant of mine at the end, I think that's about it for today. I think we've whittled on quite a lot. We've completely destroyed that tweet, and hopefully that will drop off. I quite liked the 10x approach to things and name, but I think that this tweet has destroyed it forevermore in the tech industry. But that just leaves me with to thank Jamie and Paul for their time this evening and for voicing their opinions on stuff. I've really enjoyed it. I hope that the two of you have as well.
Yeah, it's been
Almost
great. Thanks for having me back on.
Yeah, not a problem at all. And what do you guys out there think? It's a very different format to what normally happens on the Cynical Developer. Did you like it? Would you like to hear more of it? Would you like to hear more of Paul and more of Jamie? Would you like to hear less of me? I don't know. Let me know. Contact me on Twitter, in the show notes. Let's find out what you actually want. What do you want to know to be that 10x developer, to be that better developer? But until next time, thank you for listening to the Cynical Developer. I'm James Stoddart, and you've been listening to Paul and Jamie talking about how to be a better developer. If you have any questions about this or any other episode, then drop us an email, a tweet, or leave a comment on the website where you can find all the resource links, show notes for each episode. And if you enjoy this episode, please leave a review on your favourite podcast platform, iTunes, Stitcher, whatever it is, and help the Cynical Developer to reach more developers around the globe.